What would you do if, while serving your country, your world back home was falling apart? That's the question that's haunted me ever since the email came in. I remember the day like a scar. July 6th. It was 112 degrees in Kandahar, the kind of heat that makes your bones ache. I had just come off patrol, boots covered in sand and blood, none of it mine, thankfully. I was exhausted, drenched in sweat, and mentally fried. The only thing that kept me going was the thought of home, Emily, our little boy, Daniel, and the dream of barbecues, bedtime stories, and lazy Sunday mornings in our house back in North Carolina. I had 30 unread emails in my inbox that night, but one subject line burned hotter than the Afghan sun. You need to come home. She's gone. It was from my best friend back home, Jeremy. No fluff. No explanation. Just those 6 words. My stomach dropped like a mortar shell had landed beside me. I reread it 3, 4 times. She's gone. What the hell did that mean? I clicked into the email. Jake, man, I didn't know how else to tell you this. Emily packed up the house, took Daniel, sold the furniture, and left. She's been seeing someone. It's bad. You need to come home. I stared at the screen, my heart thudding in my ears like a war drum. My hands trembled. The barracks around me fell silent, or maybe my brain just shut out the world. Emily. My Emily. We'd been high school sweethearts, married young, survived 3 deployments, a miscarriage, and my PTSD diagnosis. She was the one who told me we could get through anything, as long as we had each other. We made plans for the future, bought our first home together, raised a beautiful son. She used to write me every day, even during my first tour when we were barely scraping by. But something had changed this time. I had felt it. The calls got shorter. She'd dodge my questions about how things were going. I thought she was just stressed, raising a kid while I was gone. I never thought she would walk away. I sat on my cot for a long time that night, staring at the wall, not even blinking. Outside, the desert wind howled like it knew what was happening inside me. Then Mason, my bunkmate and closest buddy overseas, sat beside me without saying a word. He didn't have to. He knew something had shattered. Finally, I said it out loud, she left me. He didn't react. Just nodded slowly, then handed me the only thing we could offer each other over here, half of his last protein bar. A gesture of brotherhood that said, "You're not alone, even now." I didn't sleep that night. My thoughts were racing in a loop. Where was Daniel? Was he safe? Who was this guy she left me for? Why hadn't she told me? Was I really that easy to forget? I tried to call her the next day, using my one free satellite call that week. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. By the 3rd try, I just sat there, phone to my ear, listening to her old message, "Hey, it's Emily. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Love ya. Love ya." A knife to the chest. The base commander wouldn't approve emergency leave without a legal emergency. Emotional hardship, they said, isn't a reason to redeploy. I was stuck. Stuck in the middle of a war, with a new war erupting thousands of miles away, a war I didn't sign up for, and one I had no weapons for. I went back on patrol that week, body in motion, heart completely absent. I moved like a ghost. Mason kept close, worried. He kept saying, "Jake, don't let this kill you. She ain't worth it if she did you like that." But he didn't have a kid back home. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's face. His messy brown hair. The way he used to call me, Captain Dad. He was 6 now. Would he remember me if I didn't make it home? Would he understand why I wasn't there when his mom ripped our world apart? 2 weeks passed before I got another update. Jeremy sent a photo. It was Emily. Smiling. holding Daniel's hand. Standing next to a man I didn't recognize, but looked vaguely familiar. Then it hit me. It was Kyle. A guy I used to work with at the dealership before I enlisted full-time. I'd helped him get that job. I introduced him to Emily once at a company picnic. He had always been too friendly. I should have known. My hands shook so hard I dropped my phone. Mason picked it up, looked at the screen, and cursed. "That's him." I nodded. "That's the guy." "Yeah. You want me to send his address to the Taliban?" he joked, half serious. I laughed for the first time in days. It was dark, but it was a laugh. But when the laughter faded, all that remained was this empty ache. I wasn't just betrayed, I was abandoned. While I was dodging bullets and saving lives overseas, the woman I trusted most in this world was erasing me back home. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't confused. She had moved on. Without me. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Emily. Not to Jeremy. Not even to Daniel. To myself. I needed to remember that I had survived worse. I'd seen death. I'd carried bodies. I had crawled through hell. And this? This was a new kind of battlefield. But I wasn't going to let her be the one who defined my story. At the bottom of the letter, I wrote one line in all caps. She took everything, but she didn't take me. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? If you had told me, back in the spring of 2008, that the girl in the blue hoodie sitting 2 rows ahead of me in Psych 101 would someday become my wife, and later, the one to break me, I would have laughed and told you you'd watched too many Nicholas Sparks movies. But that's how Emily entered my life. Quiet, curious, and beautiful in a way that didn't scream for attention but pulled it in anyway. She used to twirl her pencil when she was thinking, and every time she did, I found myself forgetting whatever the professor was talking about. I introduced myself one afternoon outside the lecture hall. She was waiting for her ride, reading To Kill a Mockingbird. I asked what she thought about it. She said, "It's honest. Not perfect. But it matters." I told her I liked that answer. She said she liked my boots. I was wearing Army issue 1s. From the first conversation, we clicked. She was smart, thoughtful, and somehow made me feel like I could take a breath, even when the world felt like it was spinning too fast. Emily had a softness about her that reminded me of home, of front porches and iced tea, Sunday sermons, and the way my mom used to hum Patsy Cline while folding laundry. I was already in the Army Reserves, doing weekend drills and preparing for active duty after graduation. She knew that. She never flinched. I remember asking her once if she was scared of dating someone who might get deployed. She just shrugged and said, "Everyone's fighting a war of some kind. Yours just happens to come with sandbags." We got married on a Friday in June under a giant oak tree behind her grandma's farmhouse in rural Tennessee. It was 97 degrees and humid enough to drown in, but I didn't care. She wore a simple white dress and bare feet. I wore my dress blues. She said I looked like a superhero. I said she looked like the kind of dream you wake up missing for the rest of your life. That night, we danced in the grass under string lights. No fancy DJ. Just my cousin's Bluetooth speaker and a playlist we made on her old laptop. Our first dance song was "Then" by Brad Paisley. She cried when it played. I remember whispering, "I'm gonna keep you safe forever." She said, "Just come home to me." And for a while, that's exactly what I did. Life wasn't perfect, but it was real. We rented a tiny apartment, split bills, shared burnt toast and hand-me-down couches. I worked part-time at a used car lot, and she taught kindergarten. We didn't have much, but we had us. Then came Daniel. He wasn't planned, but he was perfect. I still remember the day we found out she was pregnant. I came home from drill, covered in grease from a vehicle maintenance rotation. She held out a tiny white stick with 2 pink lines and said, "So, I guess we're gonna need a bigger car." We laughed. We cried. We stayed up all night talking about names, cribs, daycares, how to afford diapers. I had nothing figured out, but I had never felt so sure about anything. When Daniel was born, I held him like he was made of glass. He had my eyes, her nose, and the tiniest fingers I'd ever seen. I promised him 2 things: I'd love him with everything I had, and I'd always come home. Emily was radiant as a mom. Exhausted, yes, but radiant. She sang to him every night, even when he cried for hours. She made all his baby food from scratch, took thousands of photos, wrote him letters for the future. She made our apartment feel like a home, even with spit-up stains on the carpet and bills piling up on the kitchen counter. But then came my first long deployment. 9 months in Iraq. That was the first crack in the wall. We wrote letters. Called when we could. Sent videos back and forth. I missed his first steps. His first words. I watched them on a grainy screen, replaying the same 13-second clip over and over while sitting in a dusty tent with 40 other guys who were doing the same thing with their own families. I made it back in one piece. But something in me had changed, and I think something in her had, too. The second deployment came less than a year later. Afghanistan this time. Emily didn't cry when I left. She kissed me, told me to stay safe, and said, "We've done this before. We'll do it again." But something about her voice felt distant. Like she was already preparing for life without me, just in case. Looking back, I wonder if it was too much for her. The fear. The waiting. The constant goodbyes and silent nights. Maybe she started to build walls to protect herself. Maybe I did, too. After Daniel turned 4, we bought a small house in North Carolina, nothing fancy, just 3 bedrooms and a backyard he could run in. It was our dream starter home. I painted the nursery sky blue. Emily picked out curtains with tiny rocket ships on them. We had plans. Real ones. Emily wanted to go back to school. I was thinking of leaving the army to stay closer to home, maybe go full-time at the dealership or start my own business. I told myself we were good. That the distance hadn't broken us. That we'd made it. But looking back now, the signs were there. Little things. Missed calls. Short texts. The way she didn't laugh at my dumb jokes like she used to. The way I stopped trying to tell her about the bad dreams, the things I'd seen. The parts of me I left buried in the desert. We stopped fighting for each other, one quiet day at a time. And then one day, she just gave up. But this chapter isn't about the end. It's about what we were before the storm hit. Because sometimes, the most painful part of a betrayal isn't what you lose. It's remembering just how much you had. There's a bond you form with the men you serve with, a bond that doesn't come from shared hobbies or growing up on the same block. It comes from living together in the shadows of war, breathing the same dust, hearing the same gunfire, and knowing that your life is in their hands just as much as theirs is in yours. That's what I had with Mason. Staff Sergeant Mason Lee from El Paso, Texas. Tough as hell, always had your 6, and somehow managed to smuggle decent coffee into every base we landed on. He was 4 years older than me, married twice, and had a tattoo of a rattlesnake across his back that he got drunk one weekend in Tucson and never bothered to explain. He was my best friend over there. Hell, he was more than that. He was the reason I kept my head above water when the rest of me was sinking. We met during my second deployment, before the Emily situation started unraveling. We'd been assigned to the same QRF, Quick Reaction Force, unit. First time I saw him, he was chewing sunflower seeds and sharpening a knife that looked more like a machete. He looked me up and down and said, "You look like you play country music for sad people." I grinned. Only when they're heartbroken. He liked that. We clicked from day one. Mason had been through it all, IEDs, ambushes, losing close friends. He had that way of speaking in short sentences, like every word cost something. But when you needed him, when the shit hit the fan, he was always there before you even called. He didn't talk about home much, but when he did, it was about his little sister, Rachel. She was a school nurse back in Texas. He said she was the only person who ever told him he wasn't as broken as he believed. I remember one night in particular, after a nasty firefight that left us scraping blood out of the inside of our Humvee, he handed me a folded photo of her and said, "If I don't make it back, send this to her. Tell her I didn't suffer." I stared at him. "Don't talk like that, man." He shrugged. "Someone's gotta." That was Mason, brutally real, never sugarcoating a damn thing. When I got the email from Jeremy about Emily leaving, Mason was the first person I told. We were in the barracks, cleaning gear after a long patrol, and I just dropped my helmet on the floor and said, "She's gone." He didn't say anything for a while. Just kept wiping down his rifle like I hadn't said anything. Then he finally looked up and said, "So now you start over. Or you let it eat you alive. But either way, you finish this tour. You don't get to fall apart out here." That hit hard. Because I wanted to fall apart. God, I wanted to. But falling apart over there didn't just hurt me, it put everyone else at risk. So I shoved it down. I kept moving. I let my heart go numb. And Mason stayed right there. When I couldn't sleep, he sat beside me in the dark. When I missed a call home, he'd toss me one of those smuggled instant coffee packs and say, "Guess that's her loss." When I looked like I was slipping, really slipping, he didn't say much. He'd just throw on his vest and say, "Let's go clear our heads," and we'd go run drills or lift weights or shoot at rocks behind the outpost until the silence felt like enough. It's weird how war makes you talk about everything and nothing all at once. We talked about what we'd do when we got out, how I wanted to build a garage of my own, maybe open a mechanic shop. He joked that he'd be my first customer, bringing in some beat-up F-150 and pretending to know what was wrong with it. I told him I'd charge him double for being annoying. We laughed. We kept each other sane. But there were moments that stuck like shards under the skin, when I saw how close we both were to breaking. One night, Mason stood staring out past the fence line, cigarette burning down to the filter, and said, "You ever wonder if there's anything left of us to come back to?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. That deployment was hell. Insurgent activity spiked. We lost 2 guys from our squad in a single week. One of them, Alvarez, was 23. He'd just gotten engaged the month before. We carried his body back to base. I watched Mason whisper something over the flag-draped stretcher before the medevac lifted off. He never told me what he said. After that, something in him dimmed. But he never stopped showing up for me. When I started to spiral, when Emily cut off all contact, when I stopped checking email altogether, Mason pulled me aside. "You got 2 choices," he said. "Either you let what she did define you, or you get the hell back up and make damn sure she doesn't win. You still breathing? Then it ain't over." I wrote those words down that night in my notebook. Read them every day after that. We had each other's backs until the day the mortar hit. That day didn't come in this chapter. But it's coming. And when it did, everything changed again. Because while Emily was tearing my life down back home, fate was about to do the same over here. Looking back now, it didn't start with the email. That was just the explosion. The real damage, the cracks in the foundation, started weeks earlier. Maybe even months. But like most people in love and desperate to believe things are fine, I ignored them. I told myself she was tired, busy, stressed with Daniel. I had 1,000 excuses. And every single one of them was a lie I fed myself so I wouldn't have to face the truth. It started with the silence. Military deployments teach you a lot about time, how fast it moves when you're getting shot at, how slow it crawls when you're waiting on a call. There's a rhythm to contact with home. You cling to it like a lifeline. For me and Emily, it was weekly video calls on Saturdays and a couple messages sprinkled in during the week. She'd send little clips of Daniel doing silly things, like trying to juggle apples or falling asleep in the dog bed with whiskey, our mutt. I lived for those moments. They reminded me that I still had something to fight for beyond the sand and blood and noise. But then, the calls got shorter. First it was, "Sorry, Jake," the Wi-Fi's acting up, followed by grainy video and her face barely visible. Then came the texts. "Just got back from running errands. Too tired to talk tonight. Love you though." Followed by, nothing. At first, I brushed it off. I knew what life was like back home, chaotic, exhausting. She was juggling work, the house, our kid, and all the other stuff I couldn't help with from 7,000 miles away. But even when she was exhausted before, she'd still make time. She used to say, "I don't care how tired I am, I need to see your face." That was gone now. I started calling more often. Leaving messages. "Hey, Em. Just checking in. I miss you. Let me know when you've got a second. Danny doing okay? Tell him I love him. Wish I could be there. Just, call when you can." Some of those messages never even got marked as read. There was one video call I'll never forget. It was mid-May. I had pulled an all-nighter on security detail and nearly fell asleep waiting for her to connect. When her face finally popped up on screen, my heart jumped, until I saw her expression. She looked distracted. Distant. Her eyes didn't really meet mine. She kept fidgeting with something off-camera. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "Look at that. I still remember your face." She gave me a half-laugh. "It's only been a few months, Jake." "I know. Just feels longer, I guess." "How's Daniel?" "He's fine. He's sleeping. School's going okay. He had a little cold, but he's better." "Did he get the Lego set I sent?" "Yeah. He broke it already." She sounded tired. Then she glanced off-screen again. "Sorry, I've got laundry going." I paused. "At this hour?" "Yeah, I couldn't sleep, figured I'd knock it out." She wasn't wearing her ring. I didn't want to bring it up. But I noticed. I asked her if everything was okay. She said yes, just busy. Always busy. I asked if she needed anything. She said no. I told her I missed her. She said, "I know. Not, I miss you too. Just, I know." I stared at her through the screen, wishing I could reach through and shake whatever this was out of her, wake her up, pull her back to us. "Are we okay?" I finally asked. There was a long pause. Then she smiled, small, fake, and said, "Of course we are. Don't worry so much. You've got enough on your plate." And just like that, the call ended. A glitch, she claimed. The Wi-Fi cut out. But deep down, I knew the truth, it wasn't the connection that dropped. It was her. I brought it up to Mason that night. We were sitting outside the tents, staring up at a sky full of stars that somehow looked more beautiful when you're this close to death all the time. "She doesn't sound like her anymore," I said. He didn't look at me when he replied. "Maybe she's just scared." "Of what?" "Of what happens when you come home." I didn't understand at first. But Mason, he had seen it before. He told me stories, soldiers coming home to empty houses, locks changed, kids calling someone else daddy. He said war doesn't just break men, it breaks the people waiting, too. I refused to believe that could be us. Emily was stronger than that. We were stronger. At least, I thought we were. Then came the credit card charge. I checked my shared account one morning and saw a withdrawal, for $200, from a furniture store in Wilmington. I messaged her. "Hey, what's the big purchase? Everything okay?" No reply for 3 days. When she finally did respond, it was vague. Just needed to replace some stuff. "Sorry, meant to tell you." I asked what she bought. No answer. I asked again. Nothing. Then a week later, the account got closed. No warning. Just gone. That was when I called Jeremy. He answered on the first ring. "Hey man," he said, voice low and nervous. "I've been meaning to talk to you." I didn't even have to ask. I just said, "Tell me what's going on." There was a long silence. Then he said it. "Jake. I think she's seeing someone. She's been spending time with Kyle." Kyle. The name hit me like a punch to the ribs. I remembered him. Friendly. Too friendly. Helped me fix my car once. I trusted him around my family. Now he was around my wife. Jeremy told me everything he knew. That she had been seen with him. That they were close. That she wasn't wearing her ring. That Daniel called him Uncle Kyle. I thanked him. Hung up. And sat there, staring at the wall. The signs had all been there. The silence wasn't just about missed calls. It was about a woman slowly detaching herself from the life we built. Quietly. Carefully. Like peeling off a bandage so you don't notice the sting right away. But I noticed now. And I knew. This wasn't just a bad patch. This was the beginning of the end. There's a moment, one single second, when your entire worldview collapses. When truth finally replaces the lies you've been feeding yourself, and suddenly, everything makes sense in the worst possible way. For me, that moment came on a dusty Tuesday evening in Kandahar, when Jeremy sent me the photo. He didn't even write a caption. Just dropped it into my inbox like a grenade and let it go off in my chest. Emily. Holding Daniel's hand. Standing in front of a new white SUV with a giant red bow on the hood, smiling. Beside her stood Kyle. One arm around her shoulders like it had been there for years. Comfortable. Familiar. Like he belonged. They looked like a family. And I looked like a ghost. My knees buckled. I sat down on the edge of my cot, phone trembling in my hand, bile rising in my throat. That SUV? I knew it. I had talked about buying something just like it for her when I got back. Safe. Roomy. Perfect for road trips. She said, "Maybe next year, babe. Let's save first." Guess she didn't wait. Mason saw the look on my face and didn't say a word. Just sat beside me, hands clasped, waiting for me to breathe again. "I knew it," I said finally. "I knew it was Kyle. I just didn't want to admit it." Mason grunted. You never want to admit the people you love are capable of destroying you. But they are. Because they're the only ones who know where to hit. I stared at that photo for 10, maybe 15 minutes. Couldn't look away. Every pixel burned into my memory. Daniel looked fine. Not scared. Not upset. Just a kid, holding hands with a man who wasn't his father. I wasn't even angry, not at first. I was hollow. I felt like someone had hit the delete button on my life, and I was watching the pieces disappear one at a time. My son. My wife. My home. Even my name, erased from the script of their lives. What stung the most wasn't the betrayal. It was how normal they looked without me. Like I had never existed. I called Jeremy that night. I had to hear it from someone I trusted, had to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, dreaming, losing my grip. "Jake," he said, voice heavy, "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to be the one to break your heart. But you deserve to know. Just tell me everything," I said. "Don't sugarcoat it." And he did. Emily had been spending time with Kyle for months. It started with him helping out, fixing stuff around the house, offering to babysit when Emily had to work late or needed time to herself. Then she stopped mentioning him altogether. Jeremy caught wind of it when he saw them together at a local diner, holding hands, laughing like high school sweethearts. "I confronted her," Jeremy said. "Told her she was out of line, that you're over there risking your life while she's playing house with another man." "What did she say?" "She told me to mind my own business." That hurt. Emily wasn't the type to shut people out. She used to say friends were family, especially when life got hard. Now she had iced out everyone who reminded her of the life she used to have. Then came the kicker. She sold the house, Jake. What? She listed it 3 weeks ago. It's already under contract. She's planning to move. Where? Don't know. But I heard it might be out of state. Maybe Georgia. Somewhere near Kyle's extended family. I stood up so fast I knocked over my cot. My blood boiled. Rage finally broke through the numbness like a dam bursting. She's taking my son across state lines without telling me. I growled. Yeah, man. She's not playing fair. I'm sorry. I ended the call and just stood there in the dark, fists clenched, breathing hard. I wanted to scream. Punch a wall. Do something. But all I could do was replay the last video I had of Daniel, him laughing, saying, "Hi Daddy," while building a Lego tower. That tower was probably gone now. Donated or thrown away or packed up by the man sleeping in my bed. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and started writing. Not to Emily. To a lawyer. I had access to a military family law consultant through base resources. They couldn't start legal action overseas, but they could help prep. I wrote down every detail, dates, messages, the photo, Jeremy's eyewitness account. Then I made a second folder. That one was for Daniel. Letters. Photos. Little things I wanted him to know when he was older. Because if Emily was rewriting our story, I needed to make sure he got the real version someday. Mason walked in around 3 a.m. and found me still awake. "Making plans?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "She thinks this is over. That I'll just come home broken and give up. You're not gonna." I looked at him, eyes bloodshot, heart shredded but still beating. "I served my country," I said. "Now I'm going to fight for my son." He clapped me on the shoulder. That's the Jake I know. But deep down, I knew something had cracked inside me. Something permanent. I wasn't the same man I was when I deployed. And when I got back. Neither was my home. War changes a man. But sometimes, the deepest scars don't come from the battlefield. They come from the people who promise to wait for you. I thought I understood pain. I'd been blown off my feet by a roadside bomb. Held a friend while he bled out on the hot ground, whispering for his mom. I'd seen destruction, smelled it, tasted it in my mouth like metal and dust. But nothing, prepared me for the quiet, gutting ache of betrayal. This wasn't just a broken heart. It was a broken identity. Because when you're serving overseas, your family back home isn't just part of your life, they're the reason for it. Every patrol, every bullet dodged, every hellish day under a sun that wants to kill you, you get through it by thinking, I'm doing this for them. But now I didn't know what I was doing it for anymore. Mason noticed the shift in me. Everyone did. I stopped calling home. I stopped opening emails. I stopped talking about after. There was no after in my head anymore. Just sand. Sweat. Rage. The days blurred together, and so did the nights. I volunteered for every mission, every checkpoint, every miserable job nobody wanted. Not because I was trying to be a hero, but because it hurt less than thinking. One night, during a 2 a.m. watch, Mason lit a cigarette and handed me one without asking. "I don't smoke," I said. "You do now," he replied. I took it. We stared out into the desert, smoke curling around us. "You going to talk to her?" he asked. "No point," I said. "She's made her choice." "And what about your boy?" That question hit harder than any bullet I'd ever taken. "Daniel. I missed his 5th birthday. Emily never told me how they celebrated. No pictures. No video. It was like I didn't exist anymore. But he still existed for me." I started writing to him again. Every day. Short letters, long ones, sometimes just a few lines on a napkin or scrap paper. "Today I watched the sun rise over a hill of nothing. It made me think of you running in the yard. You were always faster than the dog. I miss your laugh, kid. Bet your voice is changing. I hope you're kind. I hope you're still building things. I don't know if you'll see this soon or in 10 years. But just know, your dad never stopped loving you. Not once. Not ever. They became my ritual. My lifeline. But the damage was done. My squad leader called me in after I skipped a therapy session. "You need to talk to someone, Sergeant Collins," he said, arms crossed, concern in his voice. "You've been operating like a machine. That's not sustainable." "I'm fine." "You're not. And if you don't deal with what's happening at home, it's going to deal with you, out here. You don't want to make a mistake in the field because your head's back in North Carolina." He wasn't wrong. I'd already caught myself slipping. Hesitating during drills. Zoning out during briefings. I was angry, and anger doesn't make you sharp. It makes you reckless. Mason pulled me aside after that meeting. "You're not alone, man. I know it feels like it, but you're not. Let me carry some of the weight." I nodded. Didn't say a word. Because the truth is, no one could carry this for me. Not really. That's the thing about betrayal, it isolates you. Makes you feel like you're the only person on earth who's ever been gutted by someone they trusted. Then came the near miss. We were escorting a convoy through a narrow valley when we hit a coordinated ambush. RPGs slammed into the hillside. One vehicle flipped. I saw a buddy get thrown 15 feet through the air like a ragdoll. I reacted on instinct. Returned fire. Pulled one of the new guys, Mitchell, out from under a burning door. My ears were ringing. Blood was on my face. My hands shook. But I was alive. Later that night, I sat on a pile of crates outside the medical tent, watching the stars again. Same ones as home, just meaner. Mason limped over, bandaged arm tucked into a sling. "You should have been in that truck," he said. "I know. But you volunteered to ride lead." "I know. Trying to get yourself killed." I didn't answer. He didn't press. Because he knew. Somewhere deep inside me, I didn't care anymore if I came back. At least not to the life I'd left. But Mason wasn't having it. "You don't get to go out like this," he said, fire in his eyes. "You think dying out here solves anything? That it makes her regret it? That it makes your kid remember you as some kind of martyr? It doesn't. It just leaves a hole. You want to make her pay. Live. Get back. Take your life back." That night, I slept for the first time in days. Not peacefully. But with purpose. Because he was right. She had taken everything from me, but I still had something left. Me. And I was going to rebuild. Even if I had to do it with bare hands and bloody knuckles. It was just another scorched morning at base, sweat already clinging to the inside of my uniform by 8 a.m., when the letter arrived. I almost didn't open it. The envelope was cream-colored, stiff, too proper for a war zone. My name was typed neatly across the front, Sergeant Jacob Collins, and the return address wasn't from home. It was from a law office in Wilmington. That's how you know it's bad. Good news doesn't come from attorneys. I tore it open with a dull pocketknife. A sheet of expensive paper unfolded in my hands, shaking slightly in the desert wind. The first line hit me like a sniper round. Dear Mr. Collins, this letter serves as formal notice of your wife Emily Collins's intention to file for divorce, citing abandonment and irreconcilable differences. Abandonment? I was deployed. I wasn't drinking, cheating, gambling, I wasn't even missing. I was overseas serving my damn country. And now I was being painted as the one who walked away. I read the rest of the letter in a daze. Legal jargon. Court timelines. Custody discussions. Property division proposals. It was like watching your life be itemized and appraised. One paragraph for your marriage. One bullet point for your kid. A single line for your house, sold. Clean. Clinical. Cold. But it was the final paragraph that took the air from my lungs. Mrs. Collins intends to seek full custody of Daniel Collins, citing consistency, established residence, and the child's attachment to the current home environment. Should you wish to contest this, you may retain legal counsel to respond upon return. Full custody. She wasn't just divorcing me, she was trying to erase me. Mason found me in the makeshift gym, slamming a barbell against the floor like it owed me money. He didn't say a word at first. Just grabbed a dumbbell and started lifting beside me. You okay? He finally asked. Divorce is official, I said, not looking at him. He nodded slowly. You gonna fight it? I dropped the weights, hands trembling. She's going after full custody, Mason. Full. I don't even get a conversation, I get a letter. Like I'm some deadbeat. But you're not. Doesn't matter. She's already got the narrative. I'm the guy who left. Who wasn't around. Never mind, I was out here taking fire while she played house with Kyle back home. There was silence for a while. Then Mason said something I'll never forget. You weren't there, yeah. But you were present. You never stopped caring. That counts for something. And you're still here. So fight. And that word stuck in my mind. Fight. Not with fists. Not with bullets. But with truth. With resolve. With every ounce of strength I had left. I spent the next few days gathering every bit of proof I could. Every letter. Every screenshot. Every call log. I wrote down dates, recorded memories, built a timeline that showed how I was still trying, long after she stopped. I sent it all to the JAG officer on base who helped soldiers coordinate with legal counsel stateside. You've got a case, he told me after looking over the documents. Judges don't like the idea of punishing a parent who's actively deployed. You'll need representation when you get home. And fast. I nodded. Just tell me how to hit the ground running. Because now, there was no going back. The woman I had once promised forever to had made her choice. Now it was my turn. The strangest thing was, after that letter, the pain settled into something quieter. Not numbness. Not apathy. It was clarity. I was done trying to win her back. Done trying to understand her choices. Done waiting for a call that would never come. Instead, I redirected everything to Daniel. Every workout. Every mission. Every second of pain or loneliness or fury, I used it to fuel the image I carried in my mind, walking through that airport, arms open, my son running toward me. That was the vision I clung to. That was the war I had left to fight. In my off hours, I started writing a different kind of letter. One I planned to read to Daniel the first time I saw him again. Hey, buddy. I don't know what you've been told. But I need you to know something. I never left you. Not really. I had to go do a job, a hard one. But I thought about you every single day. And I'm here now. For good. And I'll never let you go. I didn't know if I'd get the words out when the time came. But writing them made me believe again. Made me remember who I was, not just a soldier, not just a husband left behind. A father. Still standing. Still fighting. You think you know what it's like to return home after being gone for so long. You imagine the reunion, the hugs, the smiles, the stories. You think of your wife greeting you at the gate, your son rushing toward you with a grin as wide as the ocean. You picture the familiar smell of your house, the comfort of your own bed, the routine you left behind, waiting for you to come back and pick up where you left off. What you don't imagine is the emptiness. I learned that the second I stepped off the plane. They told me I was supposed to feel relief, but I felt like a stranger. My boots hit the tarmac and for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of a weapon on my back, I felt the weight of something far worse, guilt. Mason was there to meet me, his face an unreadable mask, but his eyes said it all. He didn't need to say a word, he knew what I was walking into. You ready for this? He asked, carrying my duffel bag. I didn't answer at first. There was nothing to say. I just nodded. One slow, defeated movement. All right. Let's go get your stuff, Mason added, trying to sound positive. He was trying to be my anchor, but I wasn't sure it would hold. When we pulled up to my house, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The lawn was overgrown, like it hadn't been touched in months. The driveway was empty, save for a single box sitting on the front porch. I froze for a moment, staring at it. Then, I looked around, expecting to see a car, Emily's car. Daniel's old bicycle leaned against the side of the house, and my chest tightened. There was no car. There was no sign of them. There was just me, and that box. Mason must have seen the look on my face because he stepped forward. I'll handle the bags. You go inside, he said, voice low, knowing better than to make this any harder. But the minute I opened the front door, it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. The house was empty. The walls, which once echoed with the sound of Daniel's laughter, were silent. The living room was void of the little things that made it a home, the throw pillows, the family pictures, the toy cars scattered on the floor. Even the scent of coffee that used to greet me every morning was gone. I stood there for a long moment, letting the realization sink in. She was gone. She had taken everything. The house. The life we built. The family I thought I would come home to. And I wasn't ready for it. There was no note. No message. No goodbye. Just silence. I made my way to the kitchen, my feet dragging on the cold tile floor. The cabinets were empty. The refrigerator was barren, except for a few stale cans of soda and a half-empty carton of milk that had gone sour. I walked down the hallway to Daniel's room, hoping that at least something would remain, something of him. But the door creaked open to a blank, sterile room. The walls, once decorated with superhero posters and pictures he'd drawn in kindergarten, were now bare. His bed was gone. His toys, his books, everything he had ever loved, gone. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The world felt like it was closing in on me, and I was drowning in the space I once called home. I didn't know how long I stood there. Hours? Days? I didn't care. I just sat down on the floor of his empty room, my head in my hands, trying to piece together what had happened. How did it get to this? How had I gone from a soldier fighting for my country to a father who couldn't even find his own son? Mason eventually came in, standing quietly by the door. "Jake," he said gently. "We'll figure this out. You're not alone in this." But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to be told that everything would be okay. It wouldn't be. It couldn't be. "I need to find them," I said, my voice raw. "I need to find Emily and Daniel." "You will," Mason said, his tone firm. "But not tonight. Tonight, you need to take a step back. You need to breathe." He was right. I didn't want to breathe. But I had no choice. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up, pacing through the house, trying to make sense of everything. I wanted to scream, to destroy everything that had been taken from me. But what good would that do? What good would smashing things do when everything I cared about had already been ripped away? I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen, hesitating. I hadn't called Emily since the letter came. Not once. I was afraid of what her voice might do to me. Afraid that if I hurt her, I would crumble. But I had no choice. I had to hear it. I had to hear her words. I dialed her number. It rang 3 times before the voicemail picked up. "Hey, it's Emily. I'm not around right now. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I couldn't leave a message. What was I supposed to say? That I was coming to get my son? That I wouldn't let her take him from me? I hung up. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe a miracle. Maybe an answer. But what I got was the hardest thing of all, the realization that this battle was only just beginning. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be clean. But I wasn't going down without a fight. And when I did finally find them, when I saw Daniel again, nothing, not even the pain of this first day back, would ever keep me from him again. The next morning, I didn't wait around. I couldn't afford to. There was no more time for hesitation. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, and opened my laptop. I was already starting to get used to the idea of not having any idea where my life had gone, but I couldn't let that stop me from moving forward. My first task was finding her. Finding them. I tried calling Emily again. Nothing. Straight to voicemail, just like the night before. I left a message this time, one I'd never thought I'd have to make. "Emily, it's Jake. I don't know where you are, but I'm not giving up on my son. I'm coming for him. If you're not willing to talk to me, then at least tell me where he is. Please." I hung up and stared at the screen, the silence of the house surrounding me. There was nothing left to do but wait for a response. It wasn't until late afternoon that I got any sort of a lead. Mason came over to check in on me. He had his usual calm demeanor, but I could tell there was something in his eyes, something worried. "Got something," he said, sliding a sheet of paper across the table to me. "This came from one of your neighbors. She says Emily's been seeing someone, guy named Kyle." I'd start there. I stared at the name for a moment, the blood draining from my face. Kyle. The name stung like acid. I didn't know him. Didn't want to. I had never met him, but Emily had mentioned him a few times when I was still home, just passing references, nothing serious. But to hear that he was involved now. That he was part of the picture I couldn't see. That was a slap to the face. How the hell does a neighbor know about this? I muttered, shaking my head. "They talk. People talk," Mason said, giving me a look. "But I think you need to talk to him." I sat back in my chair, letting the words sink in. Part of me didn't want to confront this. Didn't want to acknowledge what this all meant. But another part of me knew I had to. This was no longer about Emily and me, it was about Daniel. And I wasn't going to let anyone keep me from him. I grabbed my keys and stood up. "I'll go," I said, my voice gruff. "I need to know what's going on. It's time to face this head-on." Mason drove me to Kyle's address. It wasn't too far from where we used to live, in a quiet neighborhood lined with too many perfect lawns and too few signs of life. The kind of place you drive through and think, this is where normal people live. Normal people. I parked across the street from Kyle's house and stared at it for a while. The house was quiet, the blinds drawn, the lawn perfectly manicured. It looked welcoming. Almost like everything I had lost had been replaced here. The thought made my stomach churn. I wasn't sure what I expected to find. Maybe I thought Kyle would be there, smug and proud, ready to rub his new life in my face. Maybe I was hoping he'd be gone, that this whole thing was just a terrible misunderstanding. But no matter what I thought, the reality was always harsher. Mason leaned over, his voice low. "You sure you want to do this, Jake?" "I have no choice," I replied. "I have to know." I walked up to the door and rang the bell. My pulse raced in my neck, my hands tight by my sides. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, each beat a reminder of how far I'd fallen from the man I used to be. A moment later, the door cracked open. A guy who looked like he was in his early 30s, Kyle, I assumed, stood there. His hair was neatly combed, his clothes pressed. He didn't look like the kind of guy who had a past full of secrets. He had the nerve to smile at me. "Can I help you?" Kyle asked, his voice overly casual, almost like I was just another one of his visitors. "I'm looking for Emily," I said, my voice tight. "I need to talk to her." He stepped out onto the porch, shutting the door behind him. The smile didn't fade, but there was something cold in his eyes. He had to know who I was. "You're Jake, aren't you?" he asked, sounding almost too pleased with himself. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Kyle's smile faltered slightly. "She's not here," he said flatly. "She left. Took off with Daniel. I'm not sure where they went, but I can tell you she doesn't want you involved in their lives anymore." His words cut through me like a knife. The hurt was familiar now. But it didn't make it any easier. "What do you mean, she left?" I forced out. "Where did she go?" "I need to see my son." "You can't," he said, his tone cold. "This is over, Jake. She's moved on. You should, too." I wasn't prepared for this. I thought I was just going to get answers. I thought if I confronted him, he'd back down, that Emily would finally see reason. But it was clear now, she had made her choice. She had already moved on, and Kyle was the new chapter in her life. But I wasn't ready to close this book. I wasn't going to let her, or him, decide my fate. "I'm not going anywhere until I know where my son is," I said, my voice firm, almost a growl. Kyle took a deep breath, clearly frustrated. But after a beat, he sighed, his shoulders slumping as if he had already won. "You want the truth. She's gone to her mom's place in Asheville. I don't know exactly where, but I know she's there." I felt my heart drop, but a new sense of resolve settled over me. I didn't know what awaited me in Asheville, but I wasn't stopping until I had my son back. "Thanks," I said, turning on my heel. "And you're right about one thing." He raised an eyebrow, confused. "I'm not going anywhere." The drive to Asheville was nothing short of a blur. I kept my eyes on the road, hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The miles stretched out in front of me, endless stretches of asphalt lined with trees and nothingness. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but the longer I drove, the more I realized that this wasn't going to be a simple confrontation. It wasn't going to be as easy as knocking on the door, demanding my son, and walking away with him. I was in uncharted territory now. I'd been through deployments, I'd faced bullets and blasts, I'd been in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. But this this was something else. This was home. This was my son. And that made it the hardest fight of all. Mason had offered to come with me, but I sent him back. He had his own life, his own commitments. This wasn't a fight I could share. This was personal. As the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the winding roads, I pulled into a gas station to stretch my legs. I needed a moment to think, clear my head, refocus. I stepped out of the truck, took a deep breath of the cool mountain air, and stared up at the horizon. It was beautiful here, too beautiful. So different from everything I had just left behind. The trees, the rolling hills, the quiet serenity of it all. The stark contrast between this peaceful place and the storm that was brewing in my chest made it all the more painful. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, seeing a message from Mason. "Jake, I don't know what's going on with her, but don't forget who you are. You're his father. Don't let her take that away from you. Whatever happens, don't back down." I stared at the screen for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. I had never doubted myself when I was overseas. I was trained to take risks, to face danger head-on. But this? This felt different. This was personal. I tapped out a quick reply. "Thanks, man. I'm gonna bring him home. I have to." The simple exchange gave me a moment of clarity, and I knew I couldn't turn back now. I had to see this through, no matter what. By the time I reached Asheville, the streets were quieter, the small-town charm clinging to the edges of every building. The air was different here, fresher, cooler, and yet, it didn't feel like home. It didn't feel like the place where I would find my family again. I followed the directions Kyle had given me, turning onto a winding road that led up into the hills. The houses here were spaced out, secluded in a way that made everything feel even more distant, like Emily was hiding out here, trying to escape everything I was. I passed several houses, each more isolated than the last. I was starting to doubt my directions when I saw the house. It wasn't much, just a small cottage with a sloping roof, tucked away behind a grove of trees. The porch light flickered on as I pulled into the gravel driveway, and I parked the truck, my heart beating faster now. This was it. I was here. I sat in the truck for a long moment, staring at the house. I wanted to be sure of myself. I wanted to feel ready. But no amount of preparation could prepare me for what came next. No amount of mental rehearsing could make this easier. I grabbed my phone one last time, quickly checking the time. It was late. Too late for a confrontation, maybe, but I couldn't wait any longer. Every moment I delayed, every second I wasted, was another moment my son was out of reach. I stepped out of the truck, walking toward the front door. My boots crunched against the gravel, the sound echoing in the quiet night. I had no plan, no script. I was going in blind, hoping my voice would carry the weight of everything I was feeling. I raised my hand to knock, but before I could, the door swung open. Emily stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide. She wasn't expecting me. She didn't even know I knew where she was. I stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to say. This was it, the woman I had married, the woman I had loved. And now, she was a stranger standing on the other side of a threshold I wasn't sure I could cross. But then I saw her eyes flicker, and something inside me snapped. "Where's Daniel?" I demanded, my voice rough. I wasn't here for small talk. I wasn't here to ask how she was doing, or if she was happy with her choices. I was here for my son. Her expression faltered, and for a brief second, I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time, regret. "He's inside," she said quietly, stepping back from the door, her face tightening. "But Jake, this isn't what you think." I didn't wait for her to say anything more. I pushed past her, walking through the door without hesitation, every step leading me closer to the one thing that mattered. I made my way down the hallway, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear the soft sound of Daniel's voice, laughter, a distant murmur. I stopped at the door to his room, my hand hovering over the knob. "Daniel?" I called softly, almost afraid to hear the sound of his voice again. It had been so long. The door creaked open, and there he was. "Daniel. My son." I had to hold back the tears as I knelt down to his level. He was standing there, a little confused, his eyes wide as they met mine. "Dad," he whispered, the smallest hint of a smile forming on his lips. My heart broke. "Yeah, buddy," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It's me." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The room felt smaller than I remembered. A few toys scattered on the floor, a stuffed bear on the bed, all the things that once made it feel like a home. But the emptiness was what hit me the hardest, the silence that followed after Daniel's voice faded into the background. I knelt there, looking at my son, my heart breaking in ways I never thought possible. He was standing in front of me, his hair a little longer, his eyes still so full of the innocence he'd always carried. But something was different, something had changed. I could see it in his eyes, in the way he looked at me, unsure of what was happening. He wasn't the little boy I'd left behind anymore. He was older, a little more distant. "Dad?" Daniel repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced toward the door, then back at me, as though uncertain about everything that was happening. I forced a smile, trying to steady my nerves. "Hey, buddy. It's okay. I'm here now." I could see the doubt in his expression, the confusion. It was clear he didn't understand why I'd been gone for so long or why everything had changed so suddenly. How could he? No one had explained it to him. Emily had shielded him from it, as she always had. And that was fine, but I wasn't about to let her keep me from him any longer. I reached out and pulled him into a tight hug, pressing my cheek against the top of his head. He was warm, still my little boy in so many ways, but now there was a distance between us, a gap that I didn't know how to bridge. I could feel the weight of that gap with every second that passed. "I've missed you, Daniel," I said softly, my voice trembling. "I've missed you so much, buddy." Daniel didn't say anything at first, his small hands resting awkwardly against my shoulders. Then, after a beat, he whispered, "Mom said you left because you didn't want to be with us anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I pulled back from the hug, my hands on his shoulders as I looked into his eyes. "No, Daniel," I said firmly, shaking my head. "That's not true. I never wanted to leave. I had to go, but I never wanted to be apart from you. I love you, you know that, right?" Daniel nodded slowly, but there was something in his eyes that told me he wasn't entirely convinced. The doubt was still there, the lingering question of why I wasn't around all those months, why I hadn't been the one to tuck him in at night, why it had always been someone else. "I'm sorry I wasn't there for you," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "I know I missed a lot, but I'm here now, okay? I'm not going anywhere." He didn't respond right away, but I could tell that hearing me say it meant something to him. It had to. He was my son, and I wasn't going to let anything stand in the way of fixing this, of making things right. I could hear Emily approaching from behind, but I didn't turn around. She wasn't the one who mattered in that moment. Daniel was. "I think it's time we talk," I said, my gaze never leaving my son. "I'm taking you home, Daniel. I've been trying to reach you for so long. I'm sorry for everything that's happened. But I'm not leaving without you." Daniel shifted uneasily. "Mom said she doesn't want you to take me," he said, his voice quiet, almost apologetic. "She said it's not safe." I felt my heart sink. Of course, Emily had told him that. She'd probably painted me as the villain, the one who couldn't be trusted, the one who didn't care. It was her way of protecting herself, keeping control over everything, keeping control over him. I know she said that, I replied, my voice calm but firm. But it's not true, Daniel. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm just here to bring you home. You belong with me, too. Daniel took a step back, glancing at the door. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the tug of war between what he knew and what I was saying. He didn't know who to trust anymore, didn't know what was right. And that was the hardest part. I could see it in his face. He just wanted everything to be okay again. He wanted his world to make sense. But I couldn't make his world whole again in one moment. I couldn't undo the hurt, the confusion, or the betrayal he'd been through. All I could do was show him that I was still his dad, that I was still here for him. Buddy, I know it's confusing, I said gently. But I promise, I'll never stop fighting for you. I'll make sure you're safe. I'll make sure you never have to wonder again. He nodded slowly, his small hands fidgeting in front of him. Then, without saying a word, he looked up at me and held out his hand. It was a small gesture, but it was everything. It was his way of telling me he trusted me again, or at least that he was willing to try. I took his hand, my grip tight and reassuring. Let's go home, Daniel, I said quietly. Before we could leave the room, Emily stepped in, her face pale and tense. Jake, you can't just take him, she said, her voice cracking. He's not ready. I turned to face her, the anger that had been building in my chest rising. He's my son, Emily. You don't get to decide that anymore. She flinched at my words, but she didn't back down. You're not the same man you were when you left. You don't know what's best for him anymore. I swallowed hard, the pain of her words sinking deep. She was right about one thing, I wasn't the same man. But I knew one thing for sure. I would always be his father. No matter what. We'll figure it out, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But I'm taking him now. She didn't stop me. She didn't say another word. We left the room, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt like I was taking a step toward healing. It wasn't the end of the battle, not by a long shot, but it was a beginning. As Daniel and I walked out of the house, the sun had set, and the darkness of the night seemed to wrap around us like a blanket. But in that moment, it didn't feel cold. It felt like a fresh start. The drive back was silent. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, his eyes focused out the window, watching the dark trees blur past. It felt like there was a gulf between us, one I couldn't cross just yet. I didn't want to push him, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that there were still walls between us, walls built by time, by distance, and by the things he had been told. He wasn't the same boy I'd left behind, and I wasn't the same man who had come home. We both had changed. But the bond between father and son was still there. It had to be. I glanced over at him every so often, but each time, he didn't look back. His small, delicate features were calm, but there was something else, something I couldn't quite read. Was he scared? Was he angry? I couldn't imagine what he was feeling right now. It was just as much of a shock for him as it was for me. The familiar streets of our hometown started to come into view, the headlights cutting through the night. It felt strange to be back, like stepping into a place where everything had moved on without me. A place that didn't know what had happened, what I had been through. A place that hadn't seen the years of struggle, the loneliness, and the grief. But I had to focus. This was about Daniel. I couldn't let the past pull me down. Hey, I said softly, trying to break the silence. You doing okay? Daniel shifted in his seat, and for the first time in the past few hours, he turned his head slightly to look at me. His eyes were guarded, but I could see a flicker of something there. Maybe it was relief. Or maybe it was just the exhaustion of everything that had happened today. I guess, he said quietly. But, why didn't you come back sooner? I felt my stomach tighten. The question was simple, but the weight of it was immense. How could I explain to him what had kept me away for so long? How could I tell him about the pain, the guilt, the months spent in places where I couldn't even think of home without getting choked up? I didn't want to leave, Daniel, I said carefully. But, things happened. I had to do things, and I wasn't able to be there for you. And for that, I'm sorry. I could feel the rawness in my voice, the weight of everything I had left unsaid. But there was no easy way to explain. There never would be. Daniel didn't say anything more after that, and I let the silence fall between us again. The road was long, and the night was heavy. But I knew the most difficult part of this journey was still ahead. When we finally pulled into the driveway of the house, I didn't get out immediately. I sat there, the engine still running, letting the weight of the moment settle in. I had Daniel back. He was here. But I had no idea where to go from here. What did I do now? The house that had once been filled with laughter, with moments I cherished, now felt empty, like a shell that had been abandoned. I could already see the cracks that would take time to heal, the wounds that would need care. Daniel was the first to speak up as he opened the door to get out. "Mom's going to be mad," he said softly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. I turned to him, leaning forward, catching his gaze. "You don't have to worry about her right now," I said, trying to reassure him. "This is about us. We'll figure everything else out." I could see that he wanted to say something, but the words seemed to get caught in his throat. And I wasn't sure if he was more worried about his mother or about me. But I wasn't about to let anything or anyone tear us apart again. I grabbed the bag I'd packed from the truck, slinging it over my shoulder as I walked toward the door, waiting for Daniel to follow me. Inside the house, the emptiness seemed even more pronounced. There were reminders of a life I once had, the couch where we used to watch movies together, the pictures on the walls of better days, but everything felt out of place now. Every corner, every space felt foreign. I moved through the house slowly, as if looking for something that could bridge the gap between who I was and who I needed to be for Daniel. "Do you want to go to your room?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light, trying to keep it from sounding as heavy as I felt. He nodded, but I could tell it was half-hearted. He was still processing everything, just like I was. "Yeah, okay," Daniel said. He turned and walked down the hallway, the sound of his footsteps soft and uncertain. I watched him go, and I felt a pang of sadness deep in my chest. This wasn't how I had imagined bringing him back. This wasn't the happy reunion I had hoped for. But that was the reality of it. Nothing was going to be easy. I had to be patient, give him the time he needed to adjust. I followed him down the hall, standing in the doorway as he sat down on his bed. His head was down, and his shoulders were slumped. "You're safe here, Daniel," I said softly, standing in the doorway. "You're not alone anymore." He didn't look up, but I saw him nod. "I know, Dad," he said quietly. "But I'm just confused. Everything's different now." I took a deep breath, stepping inside the room. "I know," I said. "It's different for me, too. But we'll figure it out together, okay? We'll take it one day at a time. I promise." He still didn't say anything, but he looked up at me, his eyes tired but softer. There was still a long way to go. I knew that. But we had time. And time, right now, was all I needed. I left him in his room and walked into the living room, sitting on the couch. I didn't know how long I would have to wait before things settled, before Daniel started to feel like things were normal again. But for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to breathe. This wasn't the end of the journey. But it was a new beginning. I wasn't sure what Emily was going to do, or how this would all unfold. But there was one thing I knew for certain. I wasn't going anywhere. I would do whatever it took to keep my promise to Daniel. To be the father he deserved. I wouldn't let him down again. The morning light streamed in through the blinds, casting long, quiet shadows across the living room. I had barely slept. Too many thoughts had swirled through my mind all night. About Daniel, about Emily, about the future. How had everything become so complicated? How had things gotten so far from where I had imagined? I could hear Daniel moving around upstairs, probably getting ready for the day, but I didn't want to interrupt. He needed space, time to adjust. I knew this. But the ache of separation, the desire to fix everything and make it right, gnawed at me constantly. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into a new chapter of our lives, one that didn't come with a guidebook. And I had no idea how to navigate it. It wasn't long before I heard a knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't expect anyone to come over, especially not so early in the morning. I glanced toward the staircase, making sure Daniel was still upstairs before I cautiously walked over to the door. I opened it to find Emily standing there, her face tight with concern. She was still wearing the same clothes from the night before, and her eyes were red, probably from lack of sleep or too many tears. I knew she'd be upset, but seeing her like this, it hit me harder than I anticipated. "Jake," she said, her voice shaky. "We need to talk." I hesitated, unsure of what to say. There were so many things I wanted to ask her, why she had kept Daniel from me, why she hadn't told me the truth. But none of that would help. Not now. Not when she was standing there, clearly distressed. "Come in," I said, stepping back to allow her inside. We both sat down on the couch, but there was an awkward distance between us, more than just the space on the seat. There was a tension in the air that neither of us could ignore. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Jake," Emily began, her voice low and controlled, though I could hear the edge of fear in her tone. "You can't just come back into his life like nothing happened. It's not that simple." I took a deep breath. "I know it's not that simple. But I'm not going to let you keep me from him anymore, Emily. He's my son, too." She clenched her jaw, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them in her lap. "He's not a piece of property, Jake. You don't just take him because you want him. You have no idea what he's been through, what I've been through. I'm the one who's been here, day after day, taking care of him, holding it all together." I felt a pang of guilt. She was right. I hadn't been there. I hadn't seen the late nights, the struggle, the moments when she must have felt like she was drowning. I had no idea what she'd been through during the months I'd been away. But at the same time, she couldn't deny what was happening now. "I know," I said quietly. "I know I wasn't there. But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let you tear him away from me again." Emily's eyes softened for a moment, but then her face hardened. "You think it's that simple? You think you can just waltz in and fix everything? You've been gone for almost a year, Jake. A year. Do you know what that does to a kid? Do you know what that does to a mother?" The sharpness of her words hit me, but I didn't back down. "I'm not asking you to fix everything. I'm just asking for a chance to be a father to my son again. I'm asking for you to trust me." She let out a bitter laugh. "Trust you? After everything that happened? How am I supposed to trust you, Jake? You left. You didn't even say goodbye. You didn't think about us. You didn't think about what it would do to him. I'm sorry, but I can't just let you in again without thinking about the consequences. You can't just walk back into our lives." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had tried to do the right thing by giving her space, by respecting her decisions, but hearing her say this, seeing the anger and pain in her eyes, it was a slap in the face. I didn't want to hurt her. I didn't want to hurt Daniel. But the reality was, nothing would ever be the same. "I never meant to hurt you, Emily," I said, my voice breaking. "I never meant for any of this to happen. But I can't fix the past. I can only be here now. I can only show you that I want to be part of Daniel's life. I want to help him heal. We both need to heal. There was a long silence between us. She looked away, her eyes filling with tears, and I felt a wave of frustration and helplessness wash over me. I wanted her to understand. I wanted her to see that this wasn't about taking Daniel from her. It was about doing what was best for him. But I knew that convincing her wouldn't be easy. She had been through so much. She had every right to be angry. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can let go of all the hurt, Jake. I don't know if I can just pretend like everything's okay. I nodded slowly, understanding the depth of her pain. I'm not asking you to forget everything. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance for Daniel. A chance for us to figure this out. Together. She wiped her eyes, but she didn't look at me. She seemed to be lost in her own thoughts, and I knew that whatever decision she made would affect all of us, especially Daniel. We sat in silence for a few more moments, neither of us knowing what to say next. But I knew one thing for sure, the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. And I had no idea what the consequences of my actions would be. But I had made my choice. And no matter what happened, I was going to fight for my son. I would fight for him, for us, and for the chance to be the father I'd promised to be. As Emily stood to leave, she gave me one last look, her expression unreadable. I'll think about it, Jake, she said quietly, her voice strained. But you need to understand that this isn't just about you anymore. It's about him. I watched her walk out the door, feeling the weight of her words press heavily on my chest. The fight wasn't over. If anything, it had just begun. The following days felt like a slow-moving tide, each moment tugging me further into a place I wasn't sure I was ready for. Every time I thought I had a grasp on what was happening, something would shift, like the ground beneath me giving way, forcing me to reorient myself. Daniel was still distant. I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, like he was watching, trying to figure out if I was going to disappear again. I couldn't blame him. After everything that had happened, everything he had witnessed between his mother and me, I knew he was as torn as I was. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me, too. The time I had spent overseas, the distance, the changes, it had all left marks on me that weren't easy to shake off. And now, returning to this fractured life, it felt like I was in between two worlds, neither of which seemed to fit. The call came in the middle of the afternoon. I was sitting in the living room, trying to go over some old family photos, searching for some semblance of the man I used to be, the man who laughed with his son, who could hold his wife close without feeling like a stranger. The phone buzzed on the coffee table, breaking my concentration. It was Emily. I hesitated before picking up. It wasn't like her to call me unless there was something important, something urgent. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey. Jake, she said, her voice low, almost too quiet. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I think we need to talk. I swallowed hard. About what? She paused for a moment, the sound of her breath on the other end of the line almost too loud. About Daniel. About what happens next. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. All right. When? Tonight, she replied. I think it's time we make some decisions. The weight of those words settled heavily in my chest. Decisions. What did she mean by that? Was she going to shut me out completely, keep Daniel from me? Or was this going to be some sort of compromise? I didn't have the answer, but I had to be ready for whatever came. I couldn't back down now. Later that evening, Emily arrived at the house again, this time with a cooler head, but still that same guarded look in her eyes. She didn't come in immediately, standing in the doorway for a moment, her hands in her pockets. I opened the door slowly, allowing her to step inside. Daniel's upstairs, I said quietly. He's probably still processing everything. I can't imagine what he's going through right now. I know, Emily replied softly, walking into the living room. I've been thinking about it, too. But I don't want us to keep dragging this out, Jake. We need to be honest with him. With each other. Her words were sharp, almost like a plea, though I wasn't sure what she was asking of me. Honest how? I asked, cautiously. What's the plan, Emily? She hesitated again, her eyes shifting away as she crossed her arms. I've spoken to a lawyer. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. A lawyer? I echoed, my voice betraying the confusion I felt. What do you mean? Why would you need a lawyer? Her expression softened, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in her tone. I'm not trying to keep Daniel from you, Jake. But I need some security, for him, for both of us. If you're serious about being here, about being a father to him, then we need something in writing. We need an agreement. I felt my stomach drop. This wasn't what I expected. So you're saying, you want to go through legal channels? You want me to sign something? Is that what this is about? Emily's gaze dropped to the floor for a moment before she looked up at me, her eyes steady. It's not about control, Jake. It's about making sure Daniel has stability. That's all I care about. I need to know that you're here to stay, that you're not going to disappear again, leaving him and me in the dark. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had been focused on getting Daniel back into my life, but I hadn't truly thought about the bigger picture, about Emily's fears, her struggle. You think I'll just walk away again? I asked, my voice low, a little hurt. She met my eyes with an unflinching gaze. I don't know. But I can't take that chance. Not with him. I exhaled sharply. I'm not going anywhere, Emily. You don't have to worry about that. But I get where you're coming from. If it'll make things easier for you, I'll do it. I'll sign whatever agreement we need. Emily looked relieved, but there was still a distance between us, a space we couldn't quite close. I could see it in her eyes, the uncertainty. She had every right to be cautious, but a part of me wished she could see past the legalities and trust me, trust that I was back for good, that I was ready to step up and be the father I needed to be for Daniel. I'll get the papers, she said after a moment. I need you to understand that this is for Daniel. This isn't about you and me. It's about his future. I nodded slowly, accepting her reasoning, though a part of me still wanted to argue. This wasn't how I imagined things would go. But I wasn't going to let my pride get in the way of doing what was best for Daniel. The rest of the night passed in an uncomfortable silence. Emily left not long after our conversation, leaving me to stew in my thoughts. Part of me felt like I had just given in, like I had lost some of the ground I'd fought so hard to reclaim. But another part of me understood that this was a necessary step, one that might be uncomfortable but would help rebuild the foundation of trust between all of us. I wanted to believe that this was the right choice. That the shifting alliances, Emily's fear and my need to prove myself, could eventually settle into something solid. But deep down, I knew that this was just the beginning. We weren't done fighting for what we wanted, and we still had a long road ahead of us. The real challenge wasn't going to be signing papers. It was going to be earning back the trust we had lost. The weeks that followed that conversation with Emily passed in a strange, heavy limbo. We'd agreed to work things out, to take the steps necessary to rebuild our family, but nothing felt certain. It was like we were all walking on eggshells, afraid that at any moment, the fragile truce we'd established could crack. Daniel and I spent more time together, which felt both comforting and unsettling. He was still distant, still cautious, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was trying, I could see that, but there were walls between us now that hadn't been there before. I didn't blame him, not entirely. How could I? I'd abandoned him once. The damage was done. But I refused to give up. The day Emily showed up at my door with the legal papers, I wasn't sure how to feel. Part of me understood the necessity. If we were going to make this work, we needed some sort of formal agreement, something that would put both our minds at ease. Another part of me, probably the part still clinging to the idea of us just being a family again, resented the very idea of it. The papers were just a formality, Emily explained. But for me, it felt like a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. When I signed the papers, I felt a strange emptiness. They were supposed to make everything clearer, safer. But all they did was draw a line in the sand. On one side, Emily and Daniel. On the other side, me, someone who had to prove that he was worthy of being part of their lives again. I wasn't sure if that line was something I could ever cross completely. "Thank you," Emily had said, her voice soft and unreadable. I nodded, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. What was there to say? "Thank you" felt like the wrong words for the moment. There was nothing to thank her for, nothing to celebrate. There was only a feeling of something being lost that couldn't be regained. She left shortly after, taking the signed papers with her. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, like a door had closed. We were still going through the motions, still trying to make things work, but the warmth between us had faded. I needed to make peace with that. But I wasn't sure I was ready. The next few days were uneventful, but heavy. Daniel was getting better at opening up, at spending time with me, though his words were few. We played basketball in the driveway one afternoon, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of the boy I used to know, the boy who laughed when he missed a shot, the one who used to try to sneak up behind me and steal my keys. But then he pulled away again, as if remembering something, and the smile faded. I couldn't force him to open up. I knew that now. It had to come in his own time, in his own way. Then, it happened. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I got a call from Emily. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was checking in, maybe it was about something to do with the agreement. But as soon as I heard her voice on the other end, something inside me tightened. "Jake, you need to come to the hospital," she said, her voice trembling. My heart stopped. What happened? Is it Daniel? "Just get here," she snapped, the panic in her voice unmistakable. I didn't wait for another word. I grabbed my keys, bolted out the door, and sped toward the hospital. My mind raced, my heart pounding in my chest. Was it an accident? Was it something else? When I arrived at the emergency room, Emily was already there, pacing outside the waiting area. Her face was pale, her hands wringing together in nervous anticipation. I rushed over to her. "Emily, what's going on? Where's Daniel?" She stopped pacing, finally looking up at me with a blank expression. "He's in surgery." The words hit me like a blow to the chest. "Surgery?" I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. "What happened? How?" Emily's eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't cry. "He was on his way home from school, and there was a car accident. He was hit by a truck, Jake. I don't know how bad it is. I don't know." I could barely process what she was saying. I wanted to feel something, anger, fear, anything, but instead, I just stood there, frozen. "How is he?" I managed to ask. Emily shook her head, clearly holding it together by sheer force of will. "We don't know. They're still working on him. They've been in there for over an hour." The next few hours were a blur. I don't remember much of what happened between then and when the doctor finally came to speak with us. The hallway was empty, the hospital sterile and quiet, but the tension between us was suffocating. The doctor was grim. "Daniel's injuries are severe. He has a head trauma and some internal bleeding, but we've managed to stabilize him for now. He's in critical condition. It's too soon to know what the long-term effects will be." I felt like I couldn't breathe. The world was spinning out of control, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The thought of losing my son, of not being there for him, was more than I could handle. I looked over at Emily, but she was already crying. She didn't make a sound, but her shoulders shook with the weight of it all. "We'll keep him in the ICU for the next 24 hours, the doctor continued. "We'll monitor him closely. You can see him, but not for long. He needs rest." I nodded numbly. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. But I was going to be there for him. I wasn't going to let him go through this alone. As we entered Daniel's room, I could barely recognize him. His face was swollen, his body hooked up to machines that beeped and clicked in the sterile silence of the ICU. He was so still. So fragile. I sat next to his bed, taking his hand in mine, trying to find some comfort in the warmth of his skin. Emily stood at the foot of the bed, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? The only thing I could do was stay. Stay with him. Stay with her. The days that followed were a blur of sterile hospital rooms, beeping machines, and the quiet hum of nurses going about their work. Daniel was still in a critical state, and each hour felt like a small eternity. I couldn't help but replay that fateful call in my mind, wondering if there had been anything I could have done differently. But regret was a pointless exercise now. What mattered was being there for him, for Emily. For the first time in a long time, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about myself, about the choices I'd made. Could I be the man I once was? Could I be the father Daniel needed me to be? I spent every possible moment in that hospital room, watching Daniel breathe, hoping for a sign of improvement. I couldn't be sure, but sometimes it felt like he squeezed my hand ever so slightly, a subtle gesture that made my heart skip a beat. Emily came and went, always lingering in the background, but we rarely spoke. The tension between us was undeniable. We were both caught in the gravity of the situation, but neither of us had the energy to deal with the deeper issues. I knew she was doing her best to keep it together, but there was something in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. She was weary, not just from the stress of Daniel's condition, but from everything that had come before it. And I didn't know how to fix it. One evening, as I sat in the chair beside Daniel's bed, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I fumbled to pull it out, seeing that it was a text from Emily. "We need to talk. Alone." The message hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I had to face whatever conversation was coming. I glanced at Daniel, whose shallow breaths were steady but still a reminder of how fragile everything was. I'd been so consumed with the idea of fixing everything for him, but the reality was, there was no quick fix. There was only the messy, painful work of getting through this. I left the room quietly, making my way to the small break room where Emily was waiting. She was sitting at the table, her hands folded neatly in front of her, but there was a tension in her posture that suggested she wasn't here for a casual conversation. I sat across from her, trying to gauge her mood. Her face was tired, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but I knew I couldn't make promises like that. Not now. "You wanted to talk?" I asked softly, breaking the silence. She met my gaze, her expression unreadable. "Yes. I've been thinking about something." I nodded, unsure of where this was going. "Jake," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "I've been doing some thinking about what's best for Daniel. And I think we need to make some hard decisions. About what happens when he wakes up. About what happens next." My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Emily let out a long, shaky breath. "I don't know if we can go back to how things were. I don't know if I can trust you again, Jake. You disappeared once, and you've been gone for so long. I can't just pretend like that doesn't matter. It's not just about me anymore. It's about Daniel." The weight of her words crushed me. I had known deep down that she was struggling with everything, how could she not? But hearing her say it, so plainly, felt like a final verdict on everything I had tried to rebuild. I understand that, Emily, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I do. But I'm not the man I was when I left. I'm not perfect, but I'm here. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I don't know what you need to hear, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove it. She shook her head, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. You don't get it, Jake. It's not just about showing up. It's about being there for him, for me, when we need you the most. You can't just come back and expect everything to fall into place. You're asking me to trust you again, and that's not something I can just give you. I swallowed hard, trying to find the words that would make things better, but there were none. I'm not asking you to trust me, Emily. I'm asking for a chance to earn it. I'm asking for a chance to be part of Daniel's life. I know I can't fix everything, but I want to try. She stared at me for a long moment, the silence stretching out between us like an insurmountable chasm. It's not just about you, Jake. You're not the only one who's been hurt by all of this. I've been the one holding things together for so long, and I don't know if I have it in me to keep doing it all. I don't know if I can rely on you when I need to. I'm scared. Her words hit me like a slap to the face. I knew Emily was strong, that she'd carried the burden of everything alone for so long. But I hadn't realized just how much she had been holding back. It wasn't just about Daniel anymore, it was about her, too. And I had failed her. I'm sorry, I said quietly, my voice barely audible. I didn't realize how much you've had to carry. I don't expect everything to be okay overnight. But I swear to you, I'm not going to walk away again. Not this time. She sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of everything was crashing down on her at once. I want to believe you, Jake. I really do. But I don't know if I can. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, the tension between us thick and heavy. I didn't know if Emily would ever fully trust me again, but I couldn't give up. I couldn't walk away. Not now. I didn't know how to fix things, how to make everything right. But I knew one thing for sure. I would do whatever it took. Even if it meant sacrificing more than I had before. Later that evening, I returned to Daniel's room, my heart heavy with the weight of the conversation. Emily's words still echoed in my mind. I wanted to believe that I could be the man they both needed, but the truth was, I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to carry that burden. But for the first time in a long time, I knew I had no choice but to try. The days dragged on. Every morning, I woke up in the uncomfortable hospital chair, fighting exhaustion and dread as I looked at Daniel's still form. His condition remained the same, critical but stable. There was a small sliver of hope buried under all the fear, but it was hard to cling to when everything else around me felt like it was slipping away. I hadn't seen Emily much over the past few days. She'd been spending more time at home, and every time I tried to call her or check in, her responses were short, distant. The emotional weight of what she had said during our conversation had stuck with me, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. It was like I was stuck in a never-ending loop of guilt and uncertainty. I didn't know how much more of this emotional roller coaster I could take. But there was no other choice. I had to keep pushing through, for Daniel's sake, for Emily's sake. I had no idea how to bridge the gap that had grown between Emily and me, but I couldn't let that stop me from being there for my son. That afternoon, I got a call from Emily. I'd been trying to reach her all morning, but she hadn't answered, and to be honest, I wasn't sure what I was hoping for anymore. Maybe I just wanted to hear her voice. Maybe I was looking for some sign that things weren't completely lost. Jake, she said, her voice soft, strained. I think it's time we talk. My heart skipped a beat. Where are you? At home. Can you come by? We need to figure out, well, everything. I agreed immediately. I didn't know what everything meant, but I knew we couldn't continue to avoid the conversation. Not anymore. When I arrived at the house, the door was cracked open, and I stepped inside, feeling a strange sense of foreboding settle in my chest. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands folded in front of her. She looked tired, worn out from the past few days. But there was something in her eyes now, something that made me nervous. I took a seat across from her, but neither of us said anything for a long moment. The silence hung in the air like a thick fog. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking, Jake. About everything." She hesitated, gathering her thoughts. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep holding everything together alone." I felt the words like a punch in the gut. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "I mean," she took a deep breath. "I don't think I can be with you anymore. Not like this." The world seemed to tilt, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. "Emily, please. We can work through this. I know we can. You've seen how hard I've been trying." She shook her head slowly, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and exhaustion. "I know you've been trying, Jake. I know you're here now. But that's not enough. I need more than just someone who shows up when it's convenient. I need someone I can trust. Someone who won't abandon me again." Her words cut through me like a knife. I had no defense, no argument to counter the truth of what she was saying. I had failed her. I had failed us both. The weight of that failure was suffocating. "I don't know what you want me to say," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I know I messed up. I know I can't undo what happened. But I've changed. I'm not the same man I was when I left. I'm trying, really trying, to be the person you and Daniel need. But if you walk away now," I trailed off, the words choking me. She was silent for a long time, her gaze fixed on her hands. Then she looked up, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Jake. I don't know if I can take that risk. I'm scared. I've been scared for a long time. And I can't keep living in that fear." The truth of what she was saying hit me like a freight train. I had left her alone for so long, and now, it was as if I was finally realizing just how much damage I had caused. I had broken her trust, and no matter how hard I tried, no matter how much I wanted to fix things, it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Emily," I said quietly. "I just want a chance to prove that I can be the man you need. The man Daniel needs. But I can't do that if you don't let me in." "I don't know if I can let you in," she replied softly. "I've been carrying this burden for so long, Jake. I don't know if I can keep going like this. And I don't know if I can live in this limbo anymore. We're stuck, and I'm not sure how to move forward." The room felt small, suffocating. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that everything would be okay, that we could figure this out, but I didn't have the words. I didn't know if there were any words that could make this better. "I can't change the past, Emily," I said, my voice low. "But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." She looked at me for a long time, and for a brief moment, I thought she might say something, anything, that would bring us back from the edge. But then she stood up, shaking her head. "I don't know what to say anymore," she said quietly. "I need space, Jake. I need time to figure out what I really want. What's best for me. And for Daniel." I stood up slowly, the weight of her words settling into my bones. This was the moment. The breaking point. I had tried. I had fought, and now it felt like I was losing. The space between us felt like a chasm that could never be bridged. "I understand," I said quietly. "Take the time you need, Emily. I'll be here." And with that, I left. I drove home in silence, the hollow ache of what had just happened gnawing at me. Everything felt out of control. Everything felt like it was slipping away, no matter how hard I tried to hold on. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Emily and I could ever fix what had been broken. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to give up. Not on her. Not on Daniel. Even if the price of redemption was higher than I had ever imagined. The night after my conversation with Emily, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the darkness pressing in around me. I kept replaying everything she had said. How she didn't know if she could trust me again. How she didn't know if she could keep going. The words echoed in my mind, over and over. I had pushed her too far. I had waited too long to come back. I could still feel the weight of her eyes on me, the sadness, the weariness that lingered in her every movement. I understood now, really understood, just how much pain I had caused. I hadn't just been absent, I had been a ghost. And Emily had been left to carry the weight of everything, alone. The guilt gnawed at me, but I couldn't let it consume me. I couldn't afford to dwell in that space of regret. Because there was still one thing that mattered more than anything, Daniel. I had a choice to make. I couldn't force Emily to come back, to suddenly forgive me. That was something I couldn't control. But I could control what happened with Daniel. I could show up for him in ways that I had failed to before. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But nothing worth fighting for ever was. I went back to the hospital the next morning, my head heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. I had a lot to prove, most of all to myself. I needed to find a way to be the man I had promised I would be, even if Emily wasn't there yet. The hospital had the same sterile scent I had become so familiar with, but today it felt different. Today, it felt like a battleground, a place where I could either make things right or lose everything. I pushed through the sliding doors of the ICU, my heart pounding in my chest as I made my way down the hall to Daniel's room. When I entered, the sight of him lying in that bed, hooked up to machines, still as a stone, nearly broke me. But I couldn't let myself fall apart. Not now. Not when he needed me to be strong. I pulled the chair up beside his bed, reaching for his hand. His skin was cold, but I squeezed it, hoping that somehow, somewhere, he could feel it. That he could feel that I was here, that I was never going to leave him again. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, my voice shaky. "It's me. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." For a long time, there was no response. I just sat there, watching him, willing him to wake up. To give me some sign that he was still there, still fighting. It felt like I was waiting for something that might never come. But then, after what seemed like hours, I felt his fingers twitch slightly. It was almost imperceptible, but to me, it was the whole world. I leaned forward, my breath catching. "Daniel?" A few seconds passed, and then another twitch. This time, I could feel his grip tightening around my fingers. It wasn't much, but it was enough. "Come on, buddy," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "Come back to me. We need you." For the next few days, I didn't leave the hospital. I stayed beside Daniel's bed, talking to him, hoping my voice could bring him back. I'd tell him stories about the things we'd do when he woke up, how we'd go to the park, how I'd teach him to ride a bike, how he'd finally get to meet the new dog I'd been thinking about getting. I kept talking, even though part of me didn't know if he could hear me. But I had to believe he could. I had to hold on to hope. And slowly, very slowly, Daniel began to respond. He squeezed my hand again. His eyes fluttered. A soft groan escaped his lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. By the end of the week, Daniel had been moved out of the ICU. His recovery wasn't fast, but there were signs of progress. He was awake, though still groggy and disoriented, and the doctors were cautiously optimistic about his chances. The road ahead was long. We weren't out of the woods yet. But as I sat by his side, watching him sleep peacefully for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to hope. It was all I had left. But even as I focused on Daniel's recovery, the questions about my relationship with Emily lingered in the back of my mind. Every day, I would think about reaching out to her, but I didn't know what to say. I knew I couldn't push her into a decision. I couldn't force her to forgive me, and I couldn't pretend like everything was fine between us when it wasn't. But I also knew that I couldn't give up on her, on us. So, I did the only thing I could. I gave her space. I spent my days at the hospital, and in the evenings, would sit alone in my apartment, thinking about the future. I started looking into counseling, individual and family therapy. I didn't know if Emily would agree to it, but I knew I needed to start doing the hard work of repairing what I had broken. I couldn't fix everything overnight, but if I wanted a future with Emily, if I wanted to be a real father to Daniel, I had to be better. Time passed, and little by little, Daniel began to improve. He was talking again, though weakly. He'd smile at me when I told him jokes, and sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, he'd try to sit up. I could see the fight in him, the same fight I had to find within myself. But even with all of Daniel's progress, I knew that Emily was still in the back of my mind. She was the missing piece. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held. But as I watched Daniel make small strides every day, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for all of us. A chance to rebuild, to start over. It wasn't going to be easy. Nothing worth fighting forever is. But as long as I had a chance, as long as I had the opportunity to show them who I could be, who I wanted to be, I wouldn't give up. It had been 3 weeks since Emily and I had that painful conversation. The silence between us stretched longer each day, and the days at the hospital blurred together in a haze of hope, fear, and exhaustion. But despite the weight of everything, something was changing, within me, at least. I wasn't the same man who had boarded that plane months ago. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew I couldn't keep waiting for things to fix themselves. It was time to take action. Daniel had come a long way since that first day in the ICU. He was no longer just lying in bed, his body connected to a network of machines. Now, he was sitting up, slowly moving around, and even asking questions about his favorite cartoons. The spark was back in his eyes, and seeing that meant everything to me. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, though they said there was still a long road ahead for his full recovery. But for the first time in a while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. I spent my days by his side, but my mind was constantly tugged back to Emily. I had given her space, respected her need for time. But the truth was, I was afraid. Afraid that I was losing her. Afraid that, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't fix the things I had broken. But I also couldn't sit back and let her slip further away. I couldn't lose her, not after everything we'd been through. Not after everything I still felt for her. It was on a Thursday afternoon that I made a decision. I called Emily. Her voice, though soft and distant, still held a warmth that made my heart ache. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk? I know things aren't easy, but I think we need to face this. I think we need to face what we're both afraid of." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. "Jake, I don't know if I'm ready for this." "I get it," I replied. "I'm not asking for everything to be fixed right now. But I can't keep waiting. We have to try, Emily. For us. For Daniel. We owe it to ourselves to at least try." "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can believe that things will be different. I don't expect you to just forget what happened," I said, my words coming out more desperate than I intended. "But I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to prove to you that I'm not the same person who left." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, finally, she spoke. Okay. Okay, Jake. Let's talk. But not over the phone. I'll meet you at the hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Emily sitting in the waiting area. Her face was tired, the weight of the last few weeks etched into every line. She wasn't the same woman I had left behind. Neither of us were. But I couldn't let that deter me. I sat down beside her, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. We just sat in the uncomfortable silence that had become so familiar between us. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm scared, Jake," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "Scared that I can't keep doing this. Scared that if I let you back in, I'll get hurt again. I can't go through that." "I'm scared too," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared of not being the man you need me to be. But I'm willing to fight for us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild what we had." Her eyes softened, just a fraction, but it was enough to give me hope. Emily was listening. I wasn't sure if she believed me yet, but I knew this was a start. "I don't know if I can trust you right away," she said. "But I want to try. I don't want to lose what we have, Jake. I don't want to lose you or Daniel. But I need time. I need to see that you're serious. That you're not just going to walk away again." "I won't walk away again," I promised her, my voice steady. "I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere." She looked down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her sleeve. "It's not going to be easy," she said, her voice quiet. "We've both been through a lot. And I don't know if I can just pick up where we left off. But I'll try. I'll try if you're willing to put in the work. If you're willing to show me every day that you're serious." "I'll show you," I said. "I'll prove it, Emily. Every single day. I don't expect you to trust me right away, but I'm asking you to take a chance. I'm asking you to let me show you that I've changed." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. It wasn't a guarantee. It wasn't an immediate yes. But it was something. A crack in the wall that had been built between us. And in that moment, I knew we were both ready to take the next step. We were ready to try again. It wasn't going to be easy. We had a long road ahead of us, filled with challenges and hard conversations. But I had learned something important in the past few weeks: love was not a feeling, it was a choice. A choice to show up, to fight, and to keep going even when it felt like everything was falling apart. As Emily stood up to leave, she hesitated, her hand lingering on the door. She looked at me for a moment, a mix of uncertainty and something else in her eyes. "Jake," she said, her voice soft. "I don't know where this is going, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can make it work." A sense of relief washed over me, but I knew this was just the beginning. This wasn't the end of our story, it was a new chapter. And I was ready to take it on, whatever it took. "I'll be here," I said, my voice steady. "Every step of the way." And with that, she left, and I sat there in the hospital waiting room, feeling a sense of peace settle in my chest for the first time in weeks. The road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time, I could see a future. And that was enough to keep me moving forward. The following days after my conversation with Emily were a whirlwind. I had hoped that our meeting would magically fix everything, but I quickly learned that trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. It was a slow, painful process, one that required patience, consistency, and, most importantly, honesty. I spent my mornings at the hospital with Daniel, making sure he had everything he needed as he continued to recover. He was stronger each day, able to sit up longer, even able to feed himself with some help. It was an exhausting but rewarding process. The weight on my shoulders wasn't as heavy as it had been those first few days, but it was still there, pressing down, reminding me that I wasn't done. I had to keep moving forward, not just for him, but for Emily too. In the afternoons, I went home, cleaned up the apartment, and kept myself busy. I'd gone through so many routines in the military, where structure and discipline were second nature. It was the same now. I couldn't afford to slip into the old habits of procrastination and avoidance. I had to prove myself, prove that I could be a man of my word. One night, after a long day at the hospital, I sat down to write to Emily. I had learned that words were powerful, but they meant nothing if they weren't backed by action. So, I wrote a letter. One that didn't sugarcoat anything but was filled with the raw truth of how I felt, the mistakes I'd made, and the promises I wanted to keep. Dear Emily. I know I've hurt you. I've disappointed you in ways I can't even begin to express. I left you when you needed me the most, and I can't erase that. I can't undo the damage I've caused, and I know that saying I'm sorry isn't enough. But I also want you to know that I've changed. I've learned. And I'm still learning. I know I'm not perfect, but I'm committed to proving to you that I'm capable of being the man you deserve, every day, in every way. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now. I'm asking for the chance to show you that I can do better. I'll prove it through my actions, my consistency, and my unwavering commitment to you and to Daniel. I don't know what the future holds, but I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm ready to work for it. Jake. I wasn't sure if it was the right thing to do. Part of me wanted to run away from everything, to bury myself in the familiar comfort of avoidance. But I knew I couldn't. I had made promises, and this time, I intended to keep them. The next morning, I nervously handed the letter to the receptionist at the front desk of the hospital, asking her to give it to Emily. I wasn't sure what kind of response I was expecting. Maybe a call. Maybe nothing at all. But I had to give her the space to process it in her own way. By the end of the day, as the sun dipped low in the sky and I was finishing up my shift at the hospital, I received a text from Emily. It was simple, but the words pierced through my chest in a way I wasn't prepared for. I read your letter, Jake. And I'm willing to meet you tomorrow. 4 p.m. I think it's time we talk face to face. I had no idea what to expect from the meeting, but I knew one thing for certain, the road ahead would be long and full of challenges. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I couldn't control what Emily felt or how she would respond, but I could control my actions. I could show her that I was ready to be the man she needed. The next afternoon, I arrived early, my stomach a mix of nerves and anticipation. I walked into the cafe where we agreed to meet, scanning the room. When my eyes landed on her, my heart skipped a beat. Emily was sitting at a table in the corner, her arms folded across her chest, her face unreadable. I approached her cautiously, trying to gauge her mood, but she didn't look up until I was standing right in front of her. When she did, her gaze was sharp but not cold. She hadn't been angry when we first met, but now, I could see that something had shifted. "Hi," I said softly, sitting down across from her. "Hi," she replied, her voice quiet. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what you said." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "And?" She exhaled, as if bracing herself. "Jake, this is hard. I'm not going to pretend like I have all the answers, or that I'm ready to jump back into this. But I'm willing to try." I couldn't help the relief that flooded through me. It wasn't a definitive answer, but it was progress. She was willing to meet me halfway. And that meant everything. "I don't expect everything to go back to normal right away," I said. "I know it's going to take time. But I want you to know that I'm in this, for you and for Daniel." She nodded, her eyes softening. "I believe you. But trust isn't just about words, Jake. It's about showing up. Every single day. It's about being consistent." "I know," I said, my voice steady. "And I'll show you, Emily. Every day. I'll prove it." For the next hour, we talked, about everything and nothing. We spoke about the past, about our fears, about the hurt that had been inflicted. There were no easy answers. But there was a willingness to try again, a recognition that we weren't the same people we were before all of this happened. We didn't leave the cafe with all the answers, but we left with something more important, a renewed sense of hope. It wasn't a promise that everything would be easy, but it was a commitment to try, to rebuild, and to fight for the life we both wanted. As I walked out of the cafe, a sense of peace settled over me. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I was ready to face it. I had a family to fight for, a future to build. And I wasn't going to let go of it. The days following my meeting with Emily had been strange. Not bad, not good, just strange. There was a shift in the air, an underlying tension that neither of us knew how to navigate. We had agreed to take things slow, to rebuild, but the weight of the past still clung to us like a shadow. We were like two people on opposite sides of a chasm, each reaching out, trying to bridge the gap, but neither of us knew exactly how. Emily had made it clear that trust was a fragile thing, and I couldn't blame her. I had shattered that trust when I left, and now I had to prove every single day that I wasn't going to make the same mistake again. It was exhausting, emotionally draining, but I was determined. I wasn't going to let her slip away. I couldn't. Daniel was improving by the day. He was laughing again, his laughter echoing through the hospital room, a sound I hadn't realized I'd missed until I heard it again. Seeing him like this was a reminder of why I was fighting so hard, to give him the best chance at a normal life. To give him the life he deserved. But it also reminded me of the promises I had made to Emily. We had a child together, and I couldn't let my mistakes define the rest of our lives. Not when there was still so much love between us, even if it was buried under layers of hurt and fear. It was a Friday evening when things came to a head. Emily had come to the hospital to visit Daniel, but we hadn't had much time to talk. She was still cautious, still guarded. And I understood why. But I also knew that the silence between us was becoming more suffocating with each passing day. As I helped Daniel settle in for the night, my phone buzzed on the table next to me. It was a text from Emily. "We need to talk. Please, meet me at the park tomorrow at noon. We can't keep avoiding this." I stared at the message for a long time, my heart sinking. We need to talk. Those words always held weight, and I knew they weren't coming from a place of reconciliation. There was something more to it, something beneath the surface that I wasn't ready to confront. The next day, I arrived at the park early, my mind racing. Was this the end? Had she made up her mind? Had I lost her for good? I walked along the path, my hands shoved deep into my pockets, trying to prepare myself for whatever was coming. When I saw her sitting on a bench by the lake, the light catching in her hair, I felt a pang of something, longing, regret, fear. I took a deep breath and walked toward her, my heart pounding. "Hey," I said, sitting down beside her. "Hey," she replied, her voice tight. She wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was focused on the water, her fingers playing with the ends of her sleeves. There was a distance in her body language that made my chest ache. We sat in silence for a long moment, neither of us knowing how to begin. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Jake." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't expected it to hurt this much. I had known this day was coming, but hearing her say it out loud made everything real. Too real. "I don't want to give up," she continued, her voice shaking now. "But every day feels like a battle. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting for something that might never be what it was. I don't know if I can trust you again, Jake. Not the way I need to." I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. I wanted to say something, anything, to make it better, to convince her that I was worth the fight. But all the words in the world felt inadequate in the face of her pain. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice raw. "I know I messed up, and I know it's going to take time, but I'm not giving up on us. I can't. I'm here, Emily. And I'm ready to prove that I'm worth your trust. She finally turned to face me, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I want to believe you. I do. But every time I look at you, I'm reminded of how much you hurt me. How much you hurt us. And I don't know if I can keep living in that place. I don't know if I can keep pretending like everything's okay when it's not. The words were like a slap in the face, and I felt the walls around my heart begin to crumble. I had always known how much I had hurt her, but hearing it, seeing it in her eyes, it was unbearable. I never wanted to hurt you, Emily. Never, I said, my voice breaking. But I did. And I have to live with that. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm asking for a chance. Just one chance. To prove to you that I can be the man you deserve. She stood up, pacing a few steps away, as if the words I'd said weren't enough to quiet the storm inside her. I could see her struggling, torn between the love she once felt for me and the anger that simmered just below the surface. I don't know if I can do this, Jake. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep fighting for something that might never come back. And I don't want to keep living in limbo. The finality in her voice hit me hard. It was the breaking point. The moment I realized that no amount of apologizing, no amount of promises, could change the reality of what had happened. I had hurt her, and now she was facing the hardest decision of her life, whether or not to keep fighting for us. I'm not asking you to forget, I said, standing up and stepping closer to her. I'm asking you to take a chance. I know it's scary. I know it feels like too much. But I'm asking you to trust me. Not right away. But slowly. One day at a time. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared at the ground, her lips trembling as if she were holding back everything she had been feeling. And in that silence, I realized that this wasn't just about me proving myself to her. It was about her finding the strength to forgive, not just me, but herself. Because in order to move forward, she had to let go of the hurt, the anger, the fear. I can't promise you everything will be perfect, I said, reaching out and gently touching her arm. But I can promise you that I'll keep fighting for us. I'll keep showing up. Every single day. She looked up at me then, her eyes still filled with doubt, but there was something else too, a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make it through this. It had been weeks since that moment in the park. A lot had happened since then, and while we hadn't magically solved everything, there was a shift in the air between Emily and me, a tentative, fragile kind of hope that was slowly turning into something real. Daniel had continued to recover, his progress becoming a daily source of light in an otherwise difficult time. Every little victory with him felt like a sign, a reminder that there was still good left in the world. It gave us both something to hold on to, even when everything else felt uncertain. And Emily? She was trying. I could see it in the way she interacted with me now, the way she didn't flinch when I came near, how she was more open to talking, more willing to listen. But trust, as we both knew, wasn't something you could rush. It was something that had to be rebuilt, brick by brick, until it was strong enough to hold the weight of everything we'd been through. The turning point came one night, about a month after our heart-to-heart in the park. It was a quiet evening, one of those rare moments where everything seemed to settle. Daniel had already gone to bed, and Emily and I were sitting on the couch in the living room. We hadn't said much for the last few minutes, just letting the silence stretch between us, comfortable but still charged. I've been thinking about something, Emily said suddenly, her voice soft. I turned to her, waiting for her to continue. About us? I asked, my heart racing. She nodded. Yeah. I've been thinking about how far we've come. How much you've changed. And I realized something. She took a deep breath, her hands resting in her lap. I realized that I'm not just doing this for Daniel anymore. I'm doing this for us, for me, too. My chest tightened, a mix of relief and hope flooding me. What do you mean? I mean, she said, meeting my eyes, I'm ready to move forward. I'm ready to start again. Not because I feel like I have to, but because I want to. Because I believe that we can get through this. We've been through hell and back, Jake. And while it's not perfect, it's worth it. We're worth it. I felt the weight of her words settle over me like a warm blanket. It wasn't a perfect solution. There were still days of doubt, days where the past tried to creep back into our minds. But in that moment, Emily was telling me that she was willing to fight. For us. For our family. I don't know what the future holds, she continued, her voice steady, but I know I want to build it with you. Step by step, we can figure it out together. Tears stung my eyes as I took her hand in mine. I don't deserve you, Emily. But I'll spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me. I promise you that. We sat there, holding hands, letting the weight of her words settle into the quiet space between us. It wasn't an immediate fix, and I knew that we'd still face challenges ahead. There would be setbacks, moments of doubt, and perhaps even times when we felt like we were back at square one. But we had made it this far. Together. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Daniel's laughter echoing through the house. Emily and I both stood in the kitchen, silently sharing a look that said everything. We had been through the worst. But now, we had a chance to rebuild. I went into Daniel's room and scooped him up into my arms. His small hands grabbed at my shirt, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. No more running. No more regrets. Just a future waiting to unfold. As Emily joined us in the doorway, I saw her watching me with a soft smile on her face. She didn't need to say anything for me to know that she was proud of the progress we'd made, proud of how far we'd come. And for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe we could have it all. A family. A future. A life together. The next few months were filled with small but meaningful steps. We took time to reconnect, to share our fears and hopes. Emily and I went on dates again, small ones at first, but it felt like the beginning of something new, something that had the potential to be even better than before. We spent weekends working on our home, doing small renovations and creating a space that felt like ours again. With every paint stroke, every piece of furniture we moved, the house started to feel like a home once more. And every time we worked together, I was reminded of how much we had to offer one another. I also made sure to keep my promises, showing up for Emily, showing up for Daniel, being the man I said I would be. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes, the shadows of the past crept up on us, but we faced them together. Each time, it became a little easier to move forward. The bond between Emily and me grew stronger, built not on the fairy tale of perfection but on the raw truth of who we were. We were two people who had been broken and had found a way to come back together, two people who were learning to love, to forgive, and to grow. Together. And Daniel? He thrived. Each day, he became more independent, his laughter echoing throughout the house as he grew into the bright young boy we knew he could be. He was our hope, our future, and the reason we fought so hard for the life we had now. It wasn't a perfect ending. Life never really offers that. But as I stood there, holding my son in my arms, with Emily by my side, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. No more running. No more looking back. Just the future, and all the new beginnings it held. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?